Do you see a future in India where we could be become the protein factory of the world and exporting smart protein ingredients, products, and technologies could be done globally?
Absolutely, absolutely, Ojasvi. I think this is a very good point. We can be the protein factory of the world because we have people who are willing to take risks, people who are innovative, people are gaining better knowledge and education through education.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Smart Protein Pod by GFI India, a podcast designed to educate and guide our entrepreneurs, students, researchers, and early career professionals in the smart protein sector. We do this by inviting pioneers and trailblazers in the science, government, civil society who have shown exceptional vision for the future of our food system. I am Ojasvi Uppal, Regulatory Affairs Consultant at the Good Food Institute India, and your host for episode 4 of the Smart Protein Pod. For those new to GF Ideas India, the community was founded by GFI India for innovators who create or expand access to smart protein solutions and are working to advance the ecosystem in India. Working alongside scientists, business, and policymakers, GFI India team focuses on making alternative proteins delicious, affordable, and accessible. At GFI India, we always emphasize that regulatory clarity is fundamental to enabling market access for smart protein innovations. It is not just about compliance, but also consumer trust and investment confidence in the sector. To discuss this, we have with us a guest who has over 48 years of experience with more than 38 years in agri-trade and food safety sector. He is the only Indian to have ever served as the chairperson of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. He has been an advisor to the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. He has also served as a diplomat in the Indian mission to the European Union in Brussels. I am delighted to welcome Sri Sanjay Dave, a senior international expert at the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization, and the International Trade Center on various food safety and trade related capacity building programs. Welcome, Dave, sir.
Thank you, Ojasvi. Just a small correction. Uh, I have now completed 49 years. And next year I'll be completing 50, of course. And thank you very much, GFI, and thank you, Ojasvi, for having me on board on this podcast. It's an important podcast, and I consider it's an important subject for discussion. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm happy to be there.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, sir. And indeed, it's a very long career that you have, a very inspiring career for all of us. With all the diverse roles that you have played, I'm happy that if you can take us through all the, academic and professional experiences that you have had.
So I'll give you input on the major aspects, not on everything. Well, I did my master's in biochemistry, followed by studies in international trade at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. And then I did LLB as well. And that really has helped me in my regulatory career. After a short stint in IDPL, I joined APIDA in 1988. And in between, I went to Brussels. I was posted there to look after India's agri-trade interests. And that is where I started taking interest in Codex, international standards, because a lot of negotiations had to take place, bilateral negotiations, multilateral negotiations. And I used to be a part of all these. When I came back, I became the director of APIDA, and then the vice chair of Codex in 2008 and chairperson in 2011. And then at that time, while I was the chairperson, I was promoted again, and I moved to FSSAI, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, and where I served. And I had some very good experiences, both at APIDA as well as at FSSAI. New initiatives I had taken, which really helped, and some of these became models, not only for India, but for other countries as well. Subsequently, I was the chairperson of the National Mission for Safe Food in India, and I represented Asia in the Standards and Trade Development Facility of the WTO during 2018 and 2019. And I now continue to serve the society in the domain of food safety. That's very briefly about me.
That's a very inspiring journey and almost going to complete 50 years, which means a half century. You're a living legend among all the food technologists and professionals, and one of the many individuals who have benefited from your guidance, and not only inspired by your work, but also the discipline and integrity that you have posed. It's an honor to have you as a guest for this podcast, sir. In this vast experience that you have and witnessed so many food products, industry, and innovations that people have never seen before, where do you think smart proteins or alternative proteins fit in with the regulatory ecosystem?
See, let me give you a little background about this. Uh, when FSSAI was born in 2006 and actually rolled out in 2011, at that time, if you remember, the various acts under the Government of India were brought together into 6 main regulations, and the book was so small. What was happening? The problem was that there was no innovation taking place. There were no investments coming in. Substandard food was getting into our country. The people were not aware as to how do they produce new items to serve the growing population of the country. And for everything, people had to approach FSSAI for a product approval, which is a fact. So the only answer was to upgrade our standards, to change the entire scenario. And that was the initiative which I don't want to say it in my own mouth, but because I started that process of harmonization of national standards with the international standard, that is Codex. I started working on Codex matters in 1999, and slowly I was picking up. And therefore, I thought we needed to upgrade as per that. And based on that, we have done harmonization in other countries as well. So what was important was to bring in new regulations, new procedures, come out of what we were doing for the past several years when PFA was born. So we needed to bring in several regulations, new regulations, add food additives, which were hardly a few, and that is why that innovation wasn't taking place. So all that we did, which then helped us to come up with a huge amount of regulations, and that has helped to enhance businesses in the country. Now, coming to smart proteins, now this is an absolutely new area of work. A lot of work needs to be done. It is possible to do, but it will require a careful approach towards developing these smart proteins. So, but we can continue with this. We have started with so many things. We are gradually moving towards that. And once we are able to do that, and once we are able to actually assess the risks and have appropriate labeling provisions, for example, or claims proceed, things will settle down. Eventually, this will be the need of the hour because, the growing population, not only in India, globally, shortage of land is there. Food security issues have to be addressed. Climate change, you can see every day. Carbon emissions have to be, controlled. So all these things will have to be seen so that we can come up with, proper solutions for our people. And I do foresee a lot of business abroad for Indians.
Thank you so much, sir. In fact, I think you raised some really good points in terms of food security as well as the issues that we think that smart proteins can address. We at GFI India believe that smart proteins have the potential to fundamentally change our global food systems. From your unique perspective and deep involvement in the food ecosystem, what is your perception of smart proteins contributing to just and sustainable food systems that are fit for feeding a growing population?
Ojasvi, I think this is an important area of work, uh, which I wasn't too much concerned about until I started reading a little bit more. And the more I read, the more I think in the future this will be a requirement to develop, because the land mass is shrinking, urban area is growing, hardly much food available in the market. Not only in India, you go to Europe, you go to United States, you go to Japan or China. Now, what is the answer then? Protein deficiencies are also there. Nutritional deficiencies are also there. Maybe someday people, I mean, you start with smart proteins, but then add value to it by fortifying them. Who knows? That may happen. This will be, in my view, will be a thing of the future.
So we have a lot of work happening in this direction, and a lot of work already exists, and
Yeah.
which is why the idea that you mentioned about India also considering this and the regulatory framework being developed around it. My question would then be, how does Indian regulatory framework need to evolve to accommodate these novel foods such as cultivated meat and precision fermentation derived products?
See, in India, we have this regulation called the approval of non-specified ingredients. I was there at that time in FSSAI when this was started. Why did we start it? Because people were coming up with new products. Novel foods were coming in. Organic food was coming in. So how do you address these things? There are standardized products. There are standardized ingredients which have been recognized in India as well as internationally. Now, if new products have to come in, what will you do? You got to have a procedure for giving specific approvals. And when you have to consider proposals, whether you grant approval or not, that's a different issue. But when you want to consider these proposals, what do you need? What would the government want to know from the consumer's perspective? The same thing applies for pharma as well. What do we need? We need information about the efficacy, the toxicity, various aspects of the product have to be considered, the shelf life, then the labeling provisions. So many other things have to be considered. Now, when you have to consider all these things, what do you need? You need data. You need information. You need to conduct research and development. And after you conduct the research and development, you do some, trial runs of test marketing. All these things have to be done, and then a complete dossier has to be submitted to FSSAI, where there is an expert committee for giving approvals. They consider all that. So this is the process. And now as new products keep coming in, they need to find out ways how to consider them. The team may not be fully prepared, but they need to equip themselves with information and knowledge and understanding. And this will happen through appropriate collaborative work between scientific institutions, the stakeholders, the academia, and so many others who can then sit together and produce certain procedural documents to consider such kind of proposals as come for the smart proteins and other cell-based products. There, where it is fermentation, yes, we do have some available information. There are some standardized things, but not for everything.
Yes, sir. I think, sir, you raised quite many points in this answer, and I'd like to start from the beginning. The first thing that you mentioned was the non-specified food approval regulations. And it's something that, of course, has a very broad application in terms of innovation. What are the primary hurdles that you think a smart protein product like cultivated meat could face when filing for approval, be it scientific or administrative in terms of getting an approval under non-specified foods?
See, let's again understand this. Uh, and this has been a discussion at the global level as well. First of all, how do you define these products? There is a need for better clarity in the processes involved when there are non-traditional products. Now, what are the different issues? Issues can be categorized in different segments. Cultured meat, okay. It could be dairy products. It could be seaweed. Now, the issues there would be with regard to nutrition profiling, labeling provisions, particularly when it comes to dairy products. There could be some misleading things because, sometimes adulteration takes place. Then food safety aspects, allergens. Then come to fermentation-derived ingredients. There are several kinds of compounds. Could be food additives, could be processing aids, cell culture media, labeling, what goes inside, what comes outside. Risk analysis methodology has to be established. How do you distinguish between biomass and precision-based fermented foods? We need to bring in probably amendments in several regulations. After we've carried out some surveillance mechanisms have been implemented through pre-market approvals, through pre-market testing, we may have to amend the Schedule 4 of the licensing regulations, claims regulations, labeling regulations, prohibition and restricted foods, what is allowed, what is not allowed, taking into account our society in the country. When it comes to exports, no issues. So when you see a regulation on the FSSAI website, it is not just writing it out and notifying it. There is a lot of thought, lot of discussion, lot of consultation taking place. And particularly when it comes to smart proteins and these kinds of new products, novel foods, people even in FSSAI would be groping in the dark as to how to address these issues. So we need to find ways how to handle that. What do we need for this? We need proper guidance. Proper guidance documents will have to be required. How to carry out risk assessment? How does Codex carry out risk assessment? I have given lectures on that, on food additives and pesticides and microbiological contaminants, other contaminants, heavy metals. Some countries may be having their procedures like regulatory procedures maybe in the EU or Australia, New Zealand, and maybe Israel. Supporting inputs or documents might be required to develop our own. So these hurdles can be addressed like that.
So speaking of the hurdles and potential pathways, and in your opinion, what can FSSAI do right now to provide more clarity to Indian startups working on innovations and sustainable food solutions? There's something that can be done to streamline and make the process more effective.
You see, FSSAI can at best give a pre-market approval like it has been done before in a couple of cases, and then once that input comes back from the same startups, that can be reviewed by the scientific panels and the scientific committee before next steps can be taken. If FSSAI is going to do that, it will have to give due consideration to all aspects. They will never do it in a hurry. No regulator does it in the world. not even Codex for that matter, which is not a regulator. But they will assess all kinds of aspects. So giving support to the startups would probably be only up to the extent of giving pre-market approvals. That is my personal view. I'm not a part of FSSAI, having retired several years ago, but this is what I would understand they would do.
So, when we say pre-market approvals and then trying to address the concerns from whatever data is submitted by the startups, are there any big lessons from the traditional foods that are already out there that we can also apply to this sector?
Yeah, I know you are drawing a little similarity between traditional foods that we eat, which are not standardized, but they are traditional, they are proprietary. There's a long history of consumption. These products do not have that history at all. But if you see the traditional foods that we eat, the ingredients are already standardized, except that the recipes may be different. But in case of smart foods, smart proteins, where issues relating to texture, issues relating to sensory evaluation, issues relating to presence of other fortificants, all these things will need a proper evaluation. So there will be a difference between the two, kinds of products.
Yeah, I would now like to bring in a global perspective. 5 countries, Singapore, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, have already approved cultivated meat products. We also have a cultivated meat ecosystem in India. How does India's regulatory approach to novel foods is in comparison to that of other regulators?
Slightly complicated in the sense because we have our social factors that play in the country. Cultivated meat is there, but to what extent? People are just starting. People are still introducing these kinds of products as pre-market approvals. These are not in the market for complete sale. And here lies the problem. How do you carry out that risk evaluation? How do you get the data? From where do you get the data? Who will provide that data to you? To FSSAI. It is these startups who will have to do that. I mean, like DBT and BIRAC, they have been supporting these kinds of things with a lot of money. Why? Because we need these kinds of products in the market, but they need to be careful. They need to develop proper products which are safe for consumption.
So speaking of the risk assessment, are there any global best practices that FSSAI can, also look up to?
Let me take you to Codex, back to Codex. Codex has its procedures. Risk assessment procedures are there for food additives, for contaminants, for veterinary drugs, for pesticide residues, even for nutrition products. And there are standardized procedures of GFI, JMPR, GEMRA, GEMNU, and others. There are risk assessment policies as well. There is risk assessment procedures also given in the procedural manual for all these things. However, for these kinds of products, novel foods, if I am correct, there is none in Codex at present. But certain countries have introduced their own risk assessment procedures. For example, European Union, the countries that you just named, they have introduced their procedures. What perhaps could be done is to see what kind of procedures are there and to what extent they can be adapted into the Indian system. So I do not know whether colleagues in FSSAI have access to that information. But if it does come before them, probably FSSAI would be too happy to develop its own procedures for risk assessment.
That's very interesting information that you're suggesting, sir. What I would like to now ask is something on over-regulation and the risk of it. Is there a risk that this over-regulation will stifle the nascent industry before it even begins?
No, Ojasvi, it's not a question of over-regulation. It's a question of being cautious, taking a cautious approach, because this may lead to a number of other issues which we don't want in our country. So we got to be cautious about it, and all countries are cautious. Why is Codex taking so much time? These issues have been in discussion in Codex since when? 2021?
Yes, sir.
Where have they reached? Nowhere. They are still talking. Countries for and against. There are issues which countries are raising. I mean, these kinds of discussions have taken place in the CC Executive Committee of the Commission, also in the Commission. And then who is going to handle it? Should it be the Codex Committee on Food Additives because of the cell culture, media culture? Then somebody will have to look at the hygiene aspects, and therefore food Codex Committee on Food Hygiene. And then there will be labeling issues, which India will definitely like to look at. So then Codex Committee on Food Labeling. So all these things, all these organizations, these groups of countries meeting in Codex sessions will have to find out the best way forward. There have been discussion papers in Codex, but people are still working on it. So we can't be too fast. I'm not saying we should be too slow, but at a reasonable pace, this will have to be examined. As we call it in the government, think through the subject. And that is going to take some time. We'll have to be patient. Eventually, if this turns out to be a good decision and good result, then sky is the limit, Ojasvi.
So speaking of Codex Alimentarius Commission and wearing your former hat as the chairperson of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, what are the key challenges in harmonizing standards for products that are developed using such diverse technologies, and how does the industry in India can benefit from it?
Good question, Ojasvi. See, the issues are primarily emerging out of lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, lack of education on food safety areas of work. Some countries, like developed countries, particularly the European Union, Australia, even Japan, China, United States, Canada, they have put in a lot of efforts to understand the subjects, the risk factors. You go to European Union for even Clostridium botulinum, there is a reference laboratory. So they have developed specialized institutions, and therefore they are able to take things faster and take them forward faster on a faster plane. Whereas many countries, which are developing countries in Africa, even in South America, even in Southeast Asia or South Asia, we are not yet prepared. So when it comes to discussions at the Codex level, the developing countries really need to understand things more transparently, so that they understand where I would say where they stand. So a lot of education in food safety areas is important. That is why we started that SFC.
Yes. A very interesting initiative, and that's the perspective that you've shared is also very interesting in terms of how much the challenges these developing countries are facing. Given the reality, what common regulatory hurdles that you have observed for the startups in the innovative food space, that currently they face in India?
So the problems are, again, the startups have done some, obviously, if they have started a venture, they would have done their own research, without which they would not come in. After all, it's an investment. They would have put in some R&D efforts, for sure. But the R&D efforts would have been more directed towards developing the product. But whether they have carried out a risk assessment with respect to consumer safety, they may or may not, but not to the extent at which it is required. And that is why pre-market approvals become important. And I'm happy that, this kind of a support from the regulators has been provided, that, okay, we give you time to carry out your work, develop your product, pre-market approvals, and then come back with a large scale data. Surveillance also is an important factor, which the government regulator will have to do.
So beyond the laboratory and TRA levels, do you think that regulatory uncertainties in general affect the rate of scaling up of innovation and reaching the market readiness of a product?
Sometimes it does appear to be so, though the reasons behind all this are very noble. I'm not saying it because having been a part of the government, I'm not trying to defend anyone, but the fact is that when the government will take a decision, it will take a decision in the best interest of its population. We've never compromised on this. We have given, I remember when food fortification had to start, we were not very clear as to how do we proceed forward. But we had some discussions. We talked to ICMR, we talked to NIN, our colleague Deepthi from GAIN, she used to come and discuss with me. We had a lot of discussions. After careful consideration, which took almost 6 to 8 months, believe me, I signed that letter. Yes, let us do fortification in milk. And you ask her, as soon as she took the letter, she did not turn back. She just ran to Jaipur and said, let's do that. We've got this. And that's how it started. So, but we took time. We took some time to come to that conclusion. And once we did that, we were satisfied. Monitoring is extremely important in our country. And it is here that many times at the state level or sometimes even at the central level, we tend to overlook things. Not purposely, but by oversight. And that needs to be strengthened in our country. Once that can be strengthened properly, then the concerns of consumers can be addressed much faster.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective from the regulators end. And we understand the noble thought behind taking so much time. And looking ahead a little bit now, as you know that India is often referred to as the pharmacy of the world. Do you see a future in India where we could become the protein factory of the world, and exporting smart protein ingredients, products, and technologies could be done globally?
Absolutely, Ojasvi. I think this is a very good point. We can be the protein factory of the world because we have people who are willing to take risks, people who are innovative, people are gaining better knowledge and education through education. Government is supporting like DBT, BIRAC and all in R&D. If these things can continue, and if we can then eventually, as I said in the beginning, it's not just the protein factory of the world, but value-added protein factory of the world. If we can be, we can address most of the food security and nutrition issues of many poor countries. So India can be a major exporter of these kinds of products. And there is a huge possibility.
Well, echoing the positivity that you're showing, sir, and also thank you for acknowledging that support from DBT and BIRAC. I have a question on what would it take industry and policy makers as well as the regulator to, achieve this status together?
Well, it's important. You see, first of all, we need to have clarity on the procedures that need to be implemented. How do you carry out risk assessment? For each of the different segments that I mentioned before. And there will be variations. We need to develop those kinds of documents. How do we do that? Who will do that? Government may try to do that. FSSAI may try to do that. But supposing it is taking time, do you think the industry would like to wait? Industry wants to move forward. You want to make money. What I would see as a possibility is supposing, you may have access through your own, connections of GFI to the considerations given by some of these countries that are implementing or giving approvals for smart foods, smart proteins. Develop different guidelines. Work together with, if government is not able to do, or they are taking time to understand the whole thing, maybe the people who are familiar with this kind of a work can take that initiative as a private sector. So develop a guidance document, develop a process of how to develop the data that can then be presented in a manner that FSSAI can understand and review, and then take an informed decision. Maybe they will ask you for additional information. That's okay. That always happens. So perhaps a consultation amongst maybe the startups, some of the people who have done, or even include scientific experts from ICMR or ICAR. ICR has a number of national research centers, for example, for meat, for dairy, for fish. There are experts there. Then people from the industry can be there. If, as a private sector initiative, if you take the lead to bring some, sort of working groups to develop these kinds of few documents that will be required necessarily, whether it is by EU or by Australia or by US or by India, and then present it to FSSAI for their consideration. Maybe you can have even stakeholder consultations, or even FSSAI can convene stakeholder consultations once that kind of a draft is available. So if that initiative can be taken, perhaps this area of work can be speeded up a little bit.
Very well noted, sir. I'm sure the team would really love to work in this direction, bring all the stakeholders together. Also, put down the guidelines as you've suggested. A lot of entrepreneurs and startups will also be tuning into this episode. And as we are near the end of this episode, what would be your advice to the startups on how to work with the regulator directly and also ensure that their products are safe and nutritious to reach the consumers of India?
See, most important thing would be to develop that trust. I'm not saying there's a mistrust. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, because of lack of understanding, everybody would like to see it through a microscope. So be transparent in whatever you present. Do your own homework. Take a pre-market approval based on procedures that are already established in FSSAI, like a couple of them have already taken. establish your product as a safe product, provide data, and then come back to FSSAI. In the meantime, the other exercise of drafting these kinds of guidance documents on risk assessment and food hygiene and labeling and all that, that your working groups can do. So both of them coming together will probably make things happen in the manner in which it is desired to happen. Ethics will play a very, very important role. And minded will have to be careful, mindful of people in the country who are not always willing to follow the regulatory practices, those ethical practices. So we'll have to keep that in mind and then work transparently. So, because of these kinds of examples, then people start, have a suspicion. Product kaisa hai? What are you trying to say? Is it okay? Or you are spending money and making a fool of the government. Many times it happens. I'm not saying it is going to happen here. And therefore, what is important, and I have always been professing this during all my training programs, be truthful, be ethical, be transparent. And if you can do that, I think that trust will build, and that is going to benefit the startups.
That is a great advice, sir, and our words to live by. I'm sure all the startups listening will immensely benefit from your insights that you've just shared. On a positive note, before we wrap up, I have one last question, something that we all ask all our guests. If you were to read a front page headline about smart proteins in 2020, 2035, what would you hope for it to be?
I think a tagline could be smart proteins or smart food entering into the market for food security.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, as well as I think this is very practically looking future from your perspective. That brings us to the end of our conversation, and thank you so much for joining us. Your wealth of knowledge is highly appreciated. Our audience will find it resourceful and inspiring. It's been a pleasure talking to you, sir.
Thank you, GFI, for having me over. It was a new subject for me, but I tried to new subject in the sense that I'm not dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, but I'm really happy that you gave me this opportunity to learn a little bit more about it and talk to you about it. Thank you so much.
To our viewers on YouTube and listeners on Spotify, whether you're working already in the smart protein space or just starting to explore, we hope you got some valuable information. We can only move this sector forward by working together, and a great first step is to be part of a like-minded community. If you haven't already, you can join the GF Ideas India community, a space for individuals to connect, collaborate, and discover extraordinary opportunities. You can find the guidelines on how to join the community in the description box. If something resonates with you, leave a comment or write to us at india@gfi.org. If you like this episode, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the bell icon. And if you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to follow and turn on notifications so you never miss a Smart Protein product episode. Thank you for listening. Bye bye, everyone.